It's another day. It's another set of draft previews as we're talking about Cameron Schmidt, Blake Fiddler, and Victor Eklund on today's Locked on Blue Jackets bonus episode.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets, or, some future Blue Jackets, potentially. We're continuing our bonus draft preview episode series thing that I've been doing. These are going to continue until the picks are picked or they're traded away from us. So today we're going to do another couple of options, one that is more likely, one that is less likely but fun, and then also an honourable mention who absolutely will not fall to 14th overall, but if he does, like, Don Waddell should break a hip running to the microphone to draft him. So we're going to talk first of all about Cameron Schmidt, who is probably the longest shot on this list. But what I mean by that is he is a guy that is ranked highly on a handful of scouting boards, but not in the top 32 of Bob McKenzie's final draft rankings. And, for people who are maybe new to the draft stuff, people who are maybe curious as to why Bob McKenzie's board is so different to a lot of like public scouting boards or public prospect guys boards. And that's because Bob McKenzie doesn't necessarily go via like who's the best prospect, right? A lot of these guys will rank, okay, this is my favorite prospect. This is this guy is, I think, the second best prospect. This is the third best prospect. Bob McKenzie ranks them based on where he thinks they're going to go in the draft, which is very different to who the best prospect is, right? So, for example, Cameron Schmidt was 20th overall on Tony Ferrari's board. We love Tony Ferrari on the show. He's been on the show a bunch of times. Again, he's not ranked at all in Bob McKenzie's top 32. He is, like, what did I say, 20th on Tony Ferrari? Yeah. So I want to talk about him, kind of just because he's a fun player. And also, if Jarmo Kekalainen was still in charge, he absolutely would be a Blue Jackets type pick. I don't think they're going to pick him this year because Don Waddell and Jarmo Kekalainen have very different drafting standards, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. But Waddell likes size, he likes skating. Kekalainen was like, we're just going to draft guys that have skill upside, and we'll figure everything else out when we get there, which is kind of a fun way to draft. And like, he's had a lot of success drafting like that, right? Cameron Schmidt is another undersized, skilled forward. Only 5'7", 157 pounds, playing in the WHL. Again, a lot of WHL guys we're talking about in this little preview. Started the season really hot, kind of fell off around about like late January, I think it was. But like in the first 2-3 months of the season, he scored like 25, 26 goals. But only finished with 40 at the end of the season, which, like, 40 goals is not an insignificant number of goals, right? But it's still, if you're playing for 3 months on a 26 goal pace, then the hope is that you finish the season with closer to 50 or 60 goals. But obviously, you go cold in the second half of the season. I think that's why his draft stock fell. I feel like when I was looking at early, kind of, and again, I've been hot and cold with the draft stuff this year, just because as it looked more and more likely that the Blue Jackets were not getting a lottery pick, I was more focused on the now than the future, which was kind of nice. But I feel like Schmidt was higher in previous rankings. And again, when you go cold in January, then your draft stock is going to fall, right? But there are a couple of fun players to compare Schmidt to. Cole Caulfield is one. He's got 116 goals in 280 games, which is, what's that, just under half a goal a game, which is pretty good. Logan Stankoven as well is another undersized player that I'm a big fan of. Logan Stankoven. I watched him a lot when he was with the Texas Stars in the AHL and thought he was just phenomenal. And if you can get like a Caulfield or a Stankoven out of a guy like Schmidt, like, that feels great. which also probably means that he's going to fall, right? Like, this is probably probably a second round guy, which is where both Caulfield and I believe Stankoven went in the second round as well, because that's where undersized goal scorers go, right? It's so rare for small, skilled goal scorers to go that high in the draft unless they are like out of this world good. So I don't think he's going to be there for he will be there for the Blue Jackets 20. I don't think they go for him, but I wanted to kind of talk about him a little bit just because he's that's one of my favorite kinds of players, right? Is small. He will not he's not the most physical guy in the world. But he gets involved in a post-whistle scrum. He is not afraid. Like, if someone pushes him around, he's like, well, I'm going to push you back, right? He doesn't necessarily instigate it, but he doesn't start it, but he will finish it. Which, again, is a lot of my favorite baby Blue Jackets are like that, right? Like, Luca Pinelli is a big fan of a post-whistle scrum. James Malatesta, they all fit that kind of mold of, yes, I'm small, what are you going to do about it? Which is a really fun kind of mold of players. And when you add in that kind of high-level goal scoring that Schmidt has, there's definitely something there, right? Like, obviously, his size isn't ideal, but if he keeps working on his defensive game, I think that there's definitely a top 6 player there. I think that he will probably be a middle 6 guy, but I think there's definitely top line potential. And honestly, if he's still there, I don't know off the top of my head what the Blue Jackets' next pick is after 20, because they don't have a second round pick this year. So if I do the math real quick, which is always a worry, the second round ends at 64th overall, so 14 plus 64 will be the Blue Jackets' next pick, which is 78. If I'm doing the math right. So around about, if he falls to 78th overall, this is absolutely a player that I would take. And again, I'm only mentioning him because, again, he's 20th overall on Tony Ferrari's draft board, and Tony Ferrari has him ranked that high for a reason, right? His draft board is always really interesting. Again, it's very different to Mackenzie's. Like I said, Schmidt is not ranked at all on Mackenzie's top 32. I don't know off the top of my head if he's in his top 64. I don't have that open right now, but he's definitely a fun player that I think is definitely a sleeper pick. I think he's probably a second round pick, but if he's there at 78 or whatever it is, yes, thumbs up. Let's do it. Because he just, I don't know, he fits so perfectly into what the Blue Jackets have. And I know that they have a lot of small skill scoring wingers at the minute, but I know you can kind of never have too many of those guys. And I think Schmidt would fit right in with, the Pinelli and the Del Bel Blues and the Malatesta and the Brindley of kind of Pitbully, which is, again, one of my favorite kinds of prospect. We're going to flip to someone who is much more likely for the Blue Jackets now, and someone who was kind of the first player that when I started looking, I was like, okay, the Blue Jackets are probably drafting between 14 and 20, right? Or 14 and 24, when they were hovering at the playoffs. Blake Fiddler, not to make you guys feel old, but Blake Fiddler is, in fact, yes, the son of Vernon Fiddler, who I feel like was just playing yesterday, which, again, does make me feel a bajillion years old. He is currently ranked, so Bob McKenzie has him 28th, but I think he probably should be higher. He's one of he's one of the defensemen in the draft that I really like. I also want to, while I'm talking about defensemen, formal apology to Matthew Schaefer, as yesterday I said that Radim Mertko was probably the best defenseman in the draft, because I fully forgot about the guy that's going to go first overall. So, that's on me. But Blake Fiddler's probably top 5 defenseman for me, and he's one of those guys that I think it depends on how early teams start panic picking defensemen or start panic picking at certain positions, right? There was a few years ago where I believe it was when the Blue Jackets took Jiricek 6th overall, and then the very next pick, Arizona took Dmitry Simashev, I believe. I might be misremembering that, but again, so clearly they wanted a defenseman, and he was the next guy on their list, and they panicked because Jiricek was gone. So again, always kind of interesting. Someone always picks someone out of position because they really want a defenseman or they really want a center. Someone goes higher than they should, and everything else kind of topples. So if defensemen start going, like Bob McKenzie, in terms of, again, defenseman that McKenzie has ranked over Fiddler, you've got Schaefer, obviously, who's going first. Merker, who's currently ranked 11th. Jackson Smith is 12th. Sean Aitchison, 13. Logan Hensler at 15. Sasha Boumediene at 23. Cameron Reed, who we talked about yesterday, at 24. And then Blake Fiddler at 28. So, like, it really only takes a handful of players in that kind of 5 to 10 range to be like, oh no, we want a defenseman. And then before you know it, Merker's gone, Smith's gone. That bumps Aitchison up to potentially go, 11th or 12th. And, if the Blue Jackets want to go with a defenseman at 20th, Fiddler could be there. So I like Fiddler a lot. He's a right shot defenseman, which is, again, a thumb up, is a pretty good two-way game. He doesn't have, like, incredible, regular, like, normal stats. He only had 33 points in 64 games this season, which is about a half a point a game, which is not terrible. But for a first-round defensive pick, like, you'd probably want closer to 3/4 of a point a game, right? But he's big. He is a very, very good skater. He's very mobile. It's going to be really interesting, again, to see what happens with the defensemen that are ranked above him, because NHL teams love size. Don Waddell loves when defensemen can skate. He loves when players in general can skate, right? And if they are both big and good skaters, like, Fiddler feels like one of the more perfect picks for Waddell at 20. Like, for me, maybe I'm biased, but, like, I definitely have him in the top 5. I was debating if I'd have him in, like, the top 3 defensemen. So right now my defensemen are, you've got Schaefer, and then Merker's the second best. And then I kind of go back and forth on how I feel about Logan Hensler, who I believe is a guy that we're going to talk about at some point this week. Probably tomorrow, depending on what happens. But I go back and forth on whether I like Hensler better than Fiddler. But if Fiddler is available at 20, like, and you want a defenseman, I think you could do worse than taking a guy like Fiddler. I think he's kind of a project. I think he probably needs to take fewer penalties. But I think that if you can get a big, defensively responsible, good skater who can, chip in a point every other game, like, that probably won't translate to the NHL, right? Like, if he's a half a point a game in juniors, he's not going to be a half a point a game in the NHL, right? Like, that's so rarely transfers. You see kids getting 150 points in 60 games in the CHL sometimes, and then they come to the NHL and you're like, well, this might be an 80-point player, right? Like, it doesn't translate. But again, if you can get 30 to 40 points out of a guy like Fiddler, like, you're not looking at him for offense, and especially the Blue Jackets are not looking for him for offense. He might be a really great option for Matejchuk in a couple of years. Matejchuk will add that offensive pop to his game. Fiddler can be more of the shutdown guy. They both are capable of doing the other role, but I think, again, because Merker's not going to be there, like, again, I like Hensler a lot. Aitchison we're going to talk about as well. Boumediene we're going to talk about as well. But I like Blake Fiddler a lot. I think he makes a lot of sense for this team. And he's almost definitely going to be available at 20 if the Blue Jackets decide that they want to go with big defensemen instead of goalie. So 2 guys that are maybe not as likely as some of the guys that we've already talked about, right? Like, I think Carter Bear is probably going to be there, probably going to be an option at 14. Lyndon Lakovic, we've talked about, probably going to be an option at 20. Ravensbergen, an option at 20. Reed, who we talked about yesterday, probably an option at 20, right? Like, Schmidt is definitely going to be there. Fiddler's definitely almost certainly going to be there. I don't think either of those guys are like slam dunk run to the microphone picks, but they're both very reasonable players that I think could fit well into the Blue Jackets system. So I wouldn't call it like super likely that either of these guys are going to be Blue Jackets by the end of the day on Friday, but I think they're both really fun players, and if they do end up as Blue Jackets, I think there's definitely going to be something there. It's going to be fun. Now we're going to do another honorable mention because I did one yesterday. And we're talking about Radim Merker, who is definitely not going to be there for the Blue Jackets at 14th. Victor Eklund is also not going to be there for the Blue Jackets at 14th. Again, he, for my money, and in fairness, I'm really high on Victor Eklund. I am a big fan of his brother as well, which, you know, is not a secret. But he is a lot like his brother. Undersized winger that just has so much skill, a lot of energy, really, really smart player. Probably overperformed a little bit this season. Like, he was one of only 6 other 18-year-olds that in league history for Sweden with a point a game rate of 0.6 or better across 20 games. So the only other players that have done this: Elias Pettersson, Anton Frondell, William Nylander, Alec Wemberg, and David Pastrnak. He's the only other player that's done it for his age, right? Which is kind of wild. And he has 31 points in 42 contests. For my money, he's a top 5 player in this draft. Because he's small, he's going to drop. He's probably going to be a top 10 selection. I believe Mackenzie has him at 10, but like Ferrari has him, I believe, at 3rd or 4th overall. He has him at 4th overall. If you get, again, he's not as big as like a William Nylander or a David Pastrnak, but if you can get a player with that level of skill, you run, you don't walk, right? So again, he's not going to be available at 14. He's probably going to go to the Penguins, which is a real disappointment for me personally. But I wanted to talk about him and again do like a little honorable mention because he's another guy that, like, if he falls in the draft, and there's been talk about, you know, I think I kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday. The Blue Jackets are kind of making vague mumblings about potentially moving up in the draft if someone that they like is falling. And I don't think Eklund is going to be a player that they trade up for just based on what Don Waddell wants in his players, right? But he's an excellent skater. He's an excellent offensive player. He's so competitive. Again, he's so much like his brother, and his brother really popped this year. Probably going to sign a big extension in the next kind of couple of months or so. Like, we're talking $7 or $8 million for 8 years. Like, he's a franchise piece for the San Jose Sharks. If you can get a guy like that on your team, like, to me, again, that feels like a no-brainer. But I don't think that he's what Waddell is looking for. I think if they do trade up, it's almost certainly going to be for someone like Merker, who is that big skating defenseman. But Victor Eklund's just so good, man. He's just so good. He's so fun. When the Blue Jackets were kind of going through that rough patch in March, I was like, okay, yes, if we fall to like 8th or 9th overall, like, there's a world in which Victor Eklund is available for us, which is great. Obviously that didn't happen. They kind of ended up in that mushy middle spot of 14th overall, where you're going to get a fine player, but not like a difference maker, like an immediate difference maker. But man, like, Eklund was one of my guys, like, from the beginning of the draft. Like, his draft stock started mid-round and got better and better and then dropped a little bit. And again, now he's probably going to go around 9th or 10th overall, which is, like, happy for him. But also, what if he fell like another 5 places and was there at 14? That's what I would like. That's not what Don Waddell would like, but that's what I would like. We're going to do another one of these tomorrow. In the evening time, around about dinner time. We're going to have another episode for you out tomorrow morning as well. I think what we're going to do is, unless it resolves in the next like 4 hours or so, is we'll probably take a look at all of the kind of rumors that are swirling. People are talking about, like, is Rasmus Anderson an option? People are trading Dmitry Voronkov to the New York Rangers for Keandre Miller, which is a thing that you could do and definitely shouldn't. But I think we'll talk about those things tomorrow, unless something happens before I get a chance to record, or probably while I'm asleep tonight. We'll see. But that's going to be tomorrow. We'll kind of do a roundup of what's happening, a little pre-draft madness roundup. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTEI. You can find the show at LO-Blue Jackets on Blue Sky, LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter, because try as I might, I still end up tweeting on there with the show account. And if you have comments, questions, criticisms, players that you want to see in this mini-series, you've got a couple of days left to get your votes in. Email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with another episode. And until then, make sure you stay locked on.